Monday, Human Rights Day, South Africa will commemorate those who died and were injured in the 1960 Sharpeville Massacre at the hands of police. On that day, 69 people were killed, 180 were injured when police opened fire on a peaceful crowd protesting the past laws. And now, 62 years later, what are losses and gains when it comes to human rights, and how many more massacres have we seen since then? Joining us to discuss this is Advocate Sipho Mantula. Very good morning to you, Advocate. Thank you for your time. As we take stock of the events of 62 years ago, we take a look at what is happening in Sharpeville and what those on the ground are saying about being in a township with a blood-stained history, saying that they feel neglected. What should we be looking at as we aim to celebrate or perhaps commemorate those who lost their lives?
Good morning, and to the viewers and Jumbo Africa. It's very important that when we recall or we want to reflect or commemorate the Sharpeville Massacre, in the annals of history, what were the losses? It was the loss of lives of African people, the loss of dignity. Remember that the loss of Dompa's Floor, Sharpeville was just a culmination. And if we can recall, those leaders during those times, Nyakani Tsolo from Sharpeville, Robert Sobuka from Soweto, Inlanga, Philip Hosana, they were agitating mental liberation, that a black person cannot still be asked to carry a pass law or a compass. But when you look at the gains, you might say those gains are freedom of movement, freedom of speech. But we see development in those areas that are still not satisfactory. Corruption has crept into the local governance. Now, if you go to Sharpeville today, the history of that country is not narrated very well. It is always erased in the sense that we normally even temper with commemoration of Sharpeville, where we will find contestations even around, do we celebrate, and why do we move the site of struggle? Why do we even want to change the word human rights the word Sharpeville Massacre to human rights, when we know very well that Africans, even in international law, were never human beings, and hence you will find the United Nations, after this Sharpeville Massacre, which coincidentally was on a Monday in 1960, the UN Security Council debated this apartheid policy of racism, and they said this day will be known again as a day of an international day of a struggle against racism. So what we can say in short, we still see the losses of human dignity. We still see racism in the schools. We still see racism in the workplace, and it is still sitting.
Advocate Mantula, I hope you're still on the line, but as we prepare, communities are preparing, politicians are preparing to commemorate Human Rights Day, a lot of people on the ground are saying enough with the political rhetoric. It's time now to introspect as a nation and take stock of what you make mention of. You speak about Africa. Some are saying that instead of looking at how politicians are scoring some sort of victory, they should now turn the conversation to look at the current political and social challenges of our time, like what's happening with foreign nationals and the racism you make mention of.
Correct, and the issue of us in South Africa being labeled that we are Afrophobic or xenophobic, it's a misnomer. South Africans, when they experienced this racism of Sharpeville, they bear that brand for almost 62 years. And later, when we find that the challenges of liberation movements by being corrupt has pushed many African nationals to cross borders, to become what we call wandering wanderers. And at the same time, our immigration, the migration laws are not favorable to African nationals, and they have been at least accommodating tourists, when Africans, it seems that they are the ones who are the target. But what is critical is the harmony, is the fixing of governance in those African countries that those member states have to fix, because South Africa is really under pressure, because the human rights violations that we have been talking about, they are very broad. You look at the right to health, you look at the right to life, you look at the right to electricity that many communities have been facing in this country. You look at the right to food, the high price of is facing removal by Parliament, one says that we might be losing the role of our Chapter 9s as well. And another critical issue, like I said, the Sharpeville Massacre led to many massacres. You can recall the massacres that happened in Everton, the 1992 massacre, and the massacre that happened in 1994. The massacres that have happened just recently, Marikana.
Reflect and take a look at the current socio-economic challenges that, COVID-19, the impact of COVID-19, the state of the economy, the unemployment rate. These are pressing concerns which speak to inequality as a serious human rights issue, the growing inequality between rich and poor, which we saw just last week with the World Bank reporting last week, the big differences on who controls the vast share of the economy.
Correct, and that says to us, was there even a case of reparation? If you look at our TRC report, the issue of economic wealth tax, we left the oppressors, and this narrative of inequality, poverty, it's again a mental block that was generated, scripted by the former colonizers, and hence we still left them off the hook. People are talking about Nuremberg trials today, but we never talk about apartheid trials. Actually, the TRC left them off the hook, and the issues that we are raising of inequality again, it is the same World Bank, it is the same IMF that has choked many African countries with this debt. And if you ask yourself why Africans are still in this perpetual debt, and why Africans are still beggars of foreign aid, when Africans are being owed. If you look at TRC victims of Sharpeville Massacre and many massacres, they have not received any recognition, any living conditions. Actually, they have been pushed to be getting grants, and politicians are stealing the money on a daily basis. And that's how, when we have to critically analyze the aspect of inequality, it still goes back to the haves and to the have-nots. And the land question becomes central, because what they were fighting again in 1960, it was the Group Areas Act. Black people were put in a small space, and the white people had abundance of land. And that's where we are going through today. The issue of land, the issues of inequality, the issues of job opportunities for the young people in this country. We still see white young people having opportunities more than black young people. And that's where we still find constant protest of our communities. And that's how government cannot want to celebrate Human Rights Day without recognizing the importance of Sharpeville Massacre and many massacres that have followed after 1994.